Metrics in software development can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. Metrics sometimes can be this nebulous thing that's talked about. A lot of these metrics don't really measure quality, quality like they should. And points are not indicative at all of how much work is truly getting done. Lines of code certainly is no indication of quality of developer, right? Because if I'm a senior dev, it doesn't automatically mean that I write more code than a dev 2 or a dev 1. It might actually be the opposite, right? I might be writing less code because more of my time is either going to be in meetings, writing documentation, doing some kind of architecture diagramming or design or things like that, right? So I might actually write less code. Therefore, I may actually complete less points. But points, I just think, are a poor way to measure software development work because they don't really measure, like, or they don't really truly capture what's actually taking place. Like, what is the actual work getting done? And is it indicative of complexity? Is it indicative of time it takes to do that? Is it a combination of both? It's tough to say, but it's tough to say in a way that is highlighted in the metrics. Because if I pick up a 3 point story in a sprint and I work on that and it takes me 5 days to complete, I push that out to production, deploys good, there's no issues. Then I've completed a 3 point task. The problem with that is next sprint, the assumption is that I'm going to complete yet another 3 or 5 point task. But the problem with this is software development work is not consistent, meaning that every, week to week basis, there might be a wide shift between, okay, 1 week might be really coding heavy, the next week might be really design heavy. And those two don't automatically produce equal pointed stories. So you can't automatically assume that each week is going to have the same points, point stories included in that sprint. And that's the part of the issue that I have with metrics and agile software development is that it tries to categorize everything when sometimes software development tasks can't be categorized in a clean and neat way. And certainly not like, agile says it can. True agile software development would have to look like you starting out with test driven development, you then starting out with a 1 point research ticket, you start to write your tests, and then once you complete that, you then you write another story to then meet with whoever you need to meet with, refine the requirements. Then you move to your implementation ticket where you then create the code to give you that passing test. Then you need another ticket to test that. And so you're already up to 7 or 8 points of work in order to properly follow what agile development promises. Agile development is a really nuanced thing, but sometimes it's mistakenly thought of as just working in a quote unquote fast paced environment that you're open to basically just doing whatever. And that's the problem that I have with it is agile has become equated with just a free for all, whatever happens, is what we have to work on. And that's not an approach to software development. Frankly, that's not even planning. That's just showing up and seeing what happens. And that's not a healthy approach to software development. And when I think about as we introduce agentic AI, and tools like ChatGPT and Copilot into our development workflow, it's only going to make this a lot more unclear as to what's actually happening. Because if I am automatically going to be able to produce, not write, just produce 10,000 more lines of code with Copilot, that may mean that I may be able to complete 10 more points of, work in a sprint. So therefore, I've just raised the bar for myself against these arbitrary sprint deadlines. And now the next sprint, I'm going to have to complete, who knows, 10, 15 points of work. And that's not good because what I fear is going to happen is that we are going to, as developers, we're going to put ourselves in a position where we have to throw quality out the door and replace that with speed of development and lines of code written. And those are going to be the new benchmarks with this AI tooling that we now have access to. But I think the most important thing that we as developers should focus on, and it should be like the paramount thing, in all our minds when we're approaching code, is quality, right? So the quality in terms of, well, obviously, is it going to work, but is it going to cause issues? Is it gonna break anything? But it needs to be quality, right? Like it needs to be. It's like writing an essay, right? You want to write a quality, piece, right? You want to write quality code that's going to work, that's going to be performant, but that's going to be resilient and all of the things that we talk about on this channel. But it's hard to capture that in points because a lot of that is thinking, and a lot of that doesn't fit neatly into an estimated task. Because I've seen too often that when you go to estimate a task, which I think is one of the hardest things to do in software development, it's like it's like all of a sudden you have to pre-plan and work the problem instantaneously to produce an estimate, and then that is then used to create the sprint metrics. And I just don't think it is. I just don't think it works that much. I really just don't think so, because software development is not like, it's not at all like building Legos. It's not at all like just, repeating the same stuff, right? A lot of it is working problems, and the problems change. The problems become more complex. There's new problems that have not been seen before. So to estimate how long it's going to take to solve something that hasn't been seen yet, you see the problem there? It doesn't really work. And says to, agile development, pushes us to break stories into smaller stories. But the problem is if you don't know what the story looks like to get the unknown problem fixed, or the unknown solution, in place, how do you know how to break it up? So do you go from, hey, this is an 8 point to now I'm just arbitrarily going to break it in two stories? Like that just doesn't work. You're drawing, like, you're dividing something that doesn't even exist yet, and that's just my problem with it, right? And I just fear that with all this just administrative burden added into the mix of development work, it doesn't make for good software development practices, because it detracts from time that should be there to think, to prototype, and to problem solve. And sometimes that just doesn't fit nicely into a development task in metrics. So those are my main hangups with agile development. I'm always going to push for research oriented stories, because I think research is so important in this career. And sometimes, like, when you're faced with a problem that's complex, you don't want to just jump at the first out of the box solution that seems to fit your use case. You need to test. You need a prototype, and prototyping may take months of trial and error. But then out of that, you get the data to reinforce your decision, right? You don't want to just go with the first thing. You have to test and try and see, okay, with this implementation, this produced this amount, this data, this results. So based on that, I can go now with this implementation. We have to test that. So it's not like, oh, I'm in a 2 week sprint. I take a 3 point task. I complete it in 5 days. Now I'm done. Now I go to the next thing. That's robotic. That's not how it actually works. Like, if you're actually, like, doing anything of substance, that it just doesn't work like that. Like, people want it to work like that, but the reality is, it just does not. And I think people mistakenly think that working software development jobs is going to be like, working on your car, right? Like, when you go to change your brakes, or when you go to change your oil, you pretty much know how long it's going to take you, right? There's a set number of parts. You have to do this. You have to refill it, and you got to test drive it, and then you're good. That's not how software development works, because a lot of problems that we're faced with haven't come up before. We're not changing the oil in our system. We're not putting new brake pads in our system. That's not what we're doing. So to treat work and estimate it like a car shop would estimate their work and give you an estimate on what they think it's, that just doesn't work. Like it doesn't work like that. Not certainly not in any kind of um, real world system. So anyway, those are my thoughts about agile and metrics and all that stuff that goes along with the job. That stuff can really make this job not a lot of fun. It's probably one of my least favorite parts about this job because it really it it really takes away, I think, from a lot of the enjoyment of this career. And yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.